Hey everyone, we're going to dive into Bitcoin today as Bitcoin is approaching a critical resistance level and we need to be prepared for where price is about to head next. I want to show you why you should be careful at these levels and not jumping into mindless longs because you think Bitcoin is going to fly up to 40k in a couple of months. Important video today, so like the video if you haven't already, and without further ado, let's crack on. Now, Bitcoin has been on an absolute tear in the last 3 weeks for 2023. But it is approaching a key level of resistance, and I just want to show you the key order blocks that I've marked out above us, which have now been tagged, which are coming in at about $23.7 thousand. And if you look left, you can see that this is the last order block, okay, before the down move that basically led to those new lows at about 15.5k, and we're just currently retesting that. And what's interesting is that we're starting to show a little bit of short-term weakness here potentially, especially with this potential swing failure pattern here on Bitcoin. You see swing failure patterns in action and they are very clear. These are some of the most powerful indicators that can predict at least a short-term reversal. And you can see that what we've had here is a clean break above that 23.6 level that we created at the back end of last week, took out the weekly high, and we've come slammed straight back down into the range. So we broke out and then basically deviate above and then come back down. And that's significant because every other time that we've really impulsively broke out with a large move, you can see that every time we broke out, we basically led to a big candle. Again, last time we broke out, big candle. Okay, and this time we're just starting to see maybe some of the sellers step in a little bit and people are not willing to take this that much higher in the short term, and there's not that much volume to support that. Looking at price action alone, you can see that we've got a really clean pump of about 5% to the upside into this red box, and then you can see that we've been basically slammed straight back down. So we closed an hourly candle above it, rejected, come straight back down, and now we're currently retesting some of these price levels to see if we can potentially move higher. But what I would suggest to you is on this 4 hourly, which is also going to carry over into the 12 and the daily, is if we can finish the day below 23k and we can kind of close somewhere below these candle closes over here, that would give you higher confirmation that this is an even stronger swing failure pattern, because depending on how this closes, this could still move up and push somewhere towards these highs at about 23.3 and then continue higher. But I just want you to be aware of this pattern, because when we see these patterns, then, you know, it does tend to signal some kind of short-term reversal. So keep an eye on the lower term time frames as well. We could definitely see support here at this horizontal support resistance range at about 22.7 if we come down and retest and then move higher. But if we lose this level at about 22.9, close at 23k or below, I think that there is a good chance that we'll probably revisit some of these lower levels down below us. If this deviation from the high does play out, then that does give you the easy downside targets here at about 21.7, which is the next support range which we broke out from, and that from here would be a correction of about 6-7% from current price levels. And I do think that Bitcoin will revisit at some point that 20k level, there or thereabouts, and probably sweep these lows over here because there is a lot of liquidity here. And I have seen massive candles get filled, especially on these CME gaps, and we know that we've got a CME gap here at about 20k, which typically gets retested. Like I said, people don't always like to look at CME gaps as an indicator, but 99.9% of gaps all get filled. And I want to show you something on the CME chart just now. So you can see here on the CME chart that every time we get these up gaps and down gaps, you can see that they all typically get filled in the long run. And we currently have a big gap here at about 20k to about 20.4k. I'm not saying that Bitcoin can't push higher from here, but what I am telling you that is you should be aware of this gap. Just scanning through Bitcoin's history, that you can see whenever we get impulsive moves, okay, that all of these gaps, okay, they do tend to get backfilled, which is a way of the market, you know, retesting levels as support and resistance, okay. And I just want you for you to be aware that when you get these parabolic moves, okay, like check this gap out. This reminds me a little bit of the 20k gap that we've got at the moment, is that whenever we get these parabolic moves move back up, right, these moves can be very violent and then continue back up, okay. So sometimes the price doesn't stay there for very long, but you can see that back here here in 2019 in May, we actually got like a 24% candle in you know, a couple of 12-hour candles. So just in a matter of a couple of days, 24% massive correction, filled the gap, and then continued to move higher. So let's keep that as a scenario for Bitcoin as we have that level below us. Taking a look at the RSI, you can see that we're obviously in this elevated territory on both the daily and the 12-hour. So high time frames are a little bit overextended. But you can see that there is some clear divergence forming here on these highs. So lower highs on the RSI, okay, potentially one up here for Bitcoin, and these highs are getting higher. And when you get these triple RSI divergences, you probably know that a correction is coming soon. So let's be aware of that as well. And, you know, the other thing that I wanted to point out as well is that whenever we push this high on the daily RSI and the 12-hour, okay, at about 90, and I think that RSI moved up here onto about 93, which is the highest on the 12-hour chart in Bitcoin's history. In previous times, whenever we've reached these elevated levels, Bitcoin has typically pumped a further 16%, because like I said, when the RSI is elevated, it doesn't mean that that the price can't go any higher. It just means that you need to be aware. And you know, a lot of the parabolic moves and the finishing moves, which is the sort of euphoric moves, tend to happen at these elevated RSI levels. But last time it happened, you know, Bitcoin did move up about you know, 10 to 16%. So that would probably put you at somewhere at the highest at about 25k, which is going to be this obvious horizontal resistance level here for Bitcoin. The best case scenario I can see here for Bitcoin is moving into FOMC next week, where there's likely to be some volatility. You know, we could definitely attack this 25k level and maybe even, you know, push into this red zone and maybe have one massive SFP and a deviation from this zone, and maybe actually fill this almost little void in price here at about 25.4, which we never actually tested the last time we come up to these levels. So that's the highest that I can see Bitcoin, you know, moving here in the short term. And if we did that, like I said, in these levels, you want to be aware of just some bearish patterns. So like I said, if you see some of these things like SFPs into key resistance blocks of price, or you see stuff like ascending channels, as I've mentioned on some of the altcoins. So if we kind of come down here, start to take out some highs, and then we start to wedge high like this, okay, and we get like an ascending pattern, which we know ascending patterns tend to break back to the downside. So, you know, if we see these sort of things, I just want you to be aware of it. But like I said, I think the volatility and the FOMC next week is probably going to give us a little bit more clarity with the continuation of the trend, or whether we have some sort of correction back down. So if we basically reject this red box somewhere, okay, or we basically make our next move down, the real levels, like I said, are about 21.7, and they're at about 20k. But I think for the long term, what we're looking at in the next few months is Bitcoin is probably going to give us a really good idea of where it wants to head. I think the most likely scenario is whether we deviate now or whether we come up here and then push back down. I think a correction is coming soon. It's about this next pullback which is going to give us the clarity as to what Bitcoin is going to do, because I think that if we come and get support here and we can hold this 20k zone on these high time frame levels, then what are we starting to see? Some kind of like inverted head and shoulders here, okay, which could be, you know, the base pattern for Bitcoin to move higher and really touch into those 30k levels and those 40k levels. Because I was saying that at the start of this 2023, I think at some point this year we are going to have a melt your face off rally, and it's going to move about 100 200%, and this year ultimately is still probably going to be upwards and sideways accumulation. But you know, that would be my thesis, and that would line up with that. But you know, I know as well the success rate and the failure rate of these inverse head and shoulders, and typically if we break to the upside, you know, that could give us some of those loftier targets that we just mentioned. But if we do not hold this level and we make any weekly closes back down here, okay, and we break back out of this range and we snap back down to about 17.5, I think that you really still need to be open-minded about 14k and new lows coming in, because although the 4-year cycle that we stipulated, we said Q4 is likely to mark the bottom for Bitcoin, and we have that in mind, and we should have got some buy orders in at those levels if you didn't already. But you know, I do want you to be aware of that key weekly order block, so do not discount this yet as a level of price in here, okay, that we can basically come in and touch. So definitely an option for Bitcoin to, you know, maybe just still deviate at some point here and move lower. So I would be, you know, very keen on buys over here for Bitcoin, but you might not get it. The most ideal scenario for me would have been Q4 for Bitcoin to make the bottom, which we got over here, and a touch of this order block would have been the absolute perfect entry for me to basically go pretty much all in. But at this point, I'm still maintaining a 70% Bitcoin, 65% Bitcoin ratio in my portfolio, and you know, looking to ladder in at any more lows and bids down here. So be aware of 14k. But what do I think is the most likely scenario to happen from here? I think, again, correction probably coming in pretty soon. Be patient for that. The FOMC will give you the direction there. But I think the impulsive nature of this low and the reclaim is really important of this level. And I said all of last year, I said wait for a reclaim of a range that we've lost to give you some confirmation. And when we make these impulsive moves into a range, it gives us some room and some breathing room to come back down to the downside and actually still have some room to hold and correct. Because if we came back into this range and then held this level for like only like a day or two or a week, that increases the probability of it being a fake out. But you can see that when we had this massive move up here, it gives us room to still correct, you know, a good 20% even, you know, from these levels and still hold this. So my most likely scenario at the minute, I would be cautiously optimistic that Bitcoin would be able to hold this purely on the 4-year cycle alone. In Q4, that, you know, maybe we can hold this level. This is the real main key level to hold. Maybe we get a tap of this order block here. Definitely a possibility that I could see for Bitcoin, because like I said, we always look at key order blocks, which is basically you know, a clean retest of an area that we break out from. So definitely this is looking like a possibility for Bitcoin as well. Might be a bit hard to see it at the minute with elevated prices, but if you take your rose tinted glasses off, then you know the market has an easy way of humbling you when prices are this elevated. So, you know, like I said, I'd be cautiously long here. I think obviously if you lose 15.5, we're going straight down to 14k. So the daily close here is going to be significant. I think if we can get a daily close in 10 minutes that will be below 23k and below these opening candles, I think that the most likely scenario for there probably be a nice short position. You can actually take this at least to this support level over here, and potentially even have, you know, a further correction to about 20k. But you know, if we close here strong at about 23k, it does give us our highest close on the daily, and that can still push us further into the red zone that we mentioned. And I said the highest that we're probably going to go, I think, in this short to medium term before FOMC at least, is going to be about 25k. And if you're lucky, we might get a deviation of that level. I don't think any god candles coming anytime soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, especially if you got value from this video. It massively helps me out. More videos coming out this week to give you updates, and I'll be letting you know what I'm doing with my positions. Until the next video, catch you next time.